Marina, a 10-year-old girl, stepped onto the plane with her small backpack clutched tightly. She walked past passengers busy with luggage, travelers checking phones, and children squealing with excitement. Her mother followed closely, smiling, but Marina's eyes were not on the people or the lights, they were on the plane itself. The silver wings glinting under the terminal lights, the engines humming as if alive and waiting for takeoff. Marina had always been fascinated by planes. For years she had studied them in detail, learning their controls on flight simulators at home. She had memorized the cockpit layout, practiced emergency procedures, and navigated countless virtual flights, always landing safely, always perfectly. While other children played dolls or games, Marina's world was the sky. As she walked down the aisle to her window seat, the cabin smelled of clean upholstery and fresh air. The soft yellow lighting and the quiet hum of the plane made everything feel serene. She pressed her small hand to the window and stared at the wing, imagining how it would slice through the clouds once airborne. Around her, passengers settled into their seats, some reading, some dozing, others chatting softly. The flight attendants moved through the aisles with warm smiles, offering drinks, pillows, and blankets. Marina's mother adjusted her daughter's seatbelt and whispered, "Enjoy your flight, Marina." Marina nodded but did not speak. Her attention was fully on the plane and the sky beyond. The boarding process completed, and soon the plane began its taxi toward the runway. The engines roared to life, vibrating beneath the fuselage, sending a thrilling shiver through Marina's body. She felt the familiar excitement of motion and potential, the promise of flight. When the aircraft lifted into the air, she leaned forward against the window, mesmerized as the city lights shrank below them and the clouds stretched endlessly in every direction. Once the plane leveled at 40,000 feet, passengers relaxed. Some pulled out books or tablets. Children watched cartoons while others napped. The cabin became quiet, peaceful. Marina opened her own tablet, but it was not for games. She launched her flight simulator app and began a practice flight. Her fingers moved deftly, adjusting altitude, gliding over imaginary airports. Preparing for landings she would execute with care. She whispered instructions to herself, flaps down. Approach angle, glide speed. Touchdown. Her eyes sparkled as the virtual plane settled perfectly on the runway on the screen. The man sitting beside her noticed and smiled. "That looks complicated. Do you really know how to do that?" Marina nodded without taking her eyes off the simulator. "I practice every day. I love flying." Her mother looked on with pride. "She's been obsessed since she was 5. Marina barely heard her. She was immersed in her world of flight, her mind alive with calculations of wind, altitude, and speed. Outside, the plane glided steadily, wings cutting through the clouds, engines humming perfectly. Everything was calm, everything was safe, and the passengers trusted the routine. No one on board could have imagined that the peace of this flight would soon shatter. No one could imagine that Marina's extraordinary knowledge and calm focus would be the only hope for the hundreds of lives now entrusted to fate. As the cabin lights dimmed for evening rest, Marina continued to simulate her landings, unaware that one day soon she would be performing a landing far more dangerous and real than any she had practiced on her screen. The gentle hum of the aircraft seemed to lull everyone into a sense of security, but the sky held secrets that would soon demand courage beyond age. And in that quiet moment, Marina stared at the clouds outside and whispered, almost to herself, "One day I will know exactly what to do." The plane soared peacefully above the world, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to arrive. If you want, I can continue immediately with part 2, approximately 660 words, where the engines fail, and Marina begins to prepare mentally for what's coming. The flight had reached its cruising altitude of 40,000 feet. The cabin was quiet, bathed in soft yellow light. Passengers were reading, dozing, or staring out at the endless ocean below, trusting the enormous metal bird that carried them. Marina sat by the window, her tablet still open, fingers lightly tracing a simulated flight, eyes darting between the screen and the actual wing outside. Her mind had always been alive with calculations, airspeed, glide ratios, but this time she sensed a tension in the air she couldn't simulate. It started subtly. A vibration, faint but odd, ran through the plane, barely noticeable to most passengers. Cups rattled. A woman shifted nervously. A few children looked up from their cartoons. Marina's eyes widened. She recognized it instantly. It was wrong. Very wrong. She gripped her seat edge tightly. Then, with a sudden thunderous roar, the vibration escalated into a violent shudder. The cabin lights flickered. Cups and napkins fell. People screamed. Panic rippled through the aisles. Something had gone terribly wrong. In the cockpit, alarms screamed in unison. Both engines had failed simultaneously. The plane, which moments ago had seemed invincible, now lurched violently, teetering like a wounded bird. Red warning lights flashed across every panel, and the pilots tried desperately to restart the engines. Switches were flipped, buttons pressed. Levers moved. Nothing. Silence replaced the once steady hum of the turbines. The engines were dead. The plane began a slow, terrifying descent. Passengers clutched whatever they could hold. A man held his child tightly, whispering prayers under his breath. Women cried quietly. Babies wailed. The sound of fear filled the cabin like a storm. The flight attendants moved as best they could, offering words of comfort, though their faces betrayed the panic they fought to suppress. Marina's heart raced, but she remained astonishingly calm. Her mind immediately went to the knowledge. She had practiced on her simulator countless times. Dual engine failure at high altitude glide to conserve altitude, maintain airspeed, avoid stalling. The calculations came instinctively, almost like muscle memory. She understood what needed to be done. Mom, she whispered, grabbing her mother's arm. I can help. Her mother's eyes widened, filled with fear. Marina, what do you mean? I know how to land a plane, Marina said. Her voice steady, surprisingly authoritative. Please, I can help. Around them, passengers were panicking, shouting, praying. The air felt electric with terror. But Marina's calm determination cut through the chaos. She stood up, gripping the back of her seat. Her mother held her hand tightly, but let her move forward, sensing that Marina had an unusual clarity in her eyes, a confidence that belonged to someone who had spent hours mastering the impossible. Flight attendant noticed Marina approaching the cockpit door. Miss, you need to sit down, she said, panic trembling in her voice. I'm not joking, Marina said firmly. Please, take me to the pilots. For a moment, the flight attendant froze, then nodded, realizing there was no time to waste. She led Marina through the cabin, past terrified passengers, past spilled drinks and overturned trays, and into the cockpit. Inside, the pilots stared at the small girl who had entered the heart of their dying aircraft. For a second, disbelief and desperation collided. Marina's eyes swept the controls, gauges, and instruments, taking everything in with uncanny precision. I know the engines are out, she said softly. We have to glide. I can guide you to a safe landing. The pilots exchanged glances. One had no words, only the silent acknowledgement that this tiny girl might be their only hope. Marina was ready, and now the plane, the people, and the lives of everyone on board depended on her knowledge, her courage, and her calm in the midst of chaos. The alarms continued to scream, the plane shook, and passengers gripped seats in terror. Marina took a deep breath and focused, her mind running through every emergency procedure she had practiced, every simulation, every perfect landing she had achieved. She would have to turn that knowledge into reality because there was no other choice. The vast sky outside had never seemed so wide, so dangerous, and yet Marina's heart remained steady. She knew she had a task, and she would not fail. Marina stepped fully into the cockpit, her small hands trembling only slightly as she took in the sea of blinking lights and complex controls. The pilots were tense, their faces pale and drawn from panic and disbelief. One of them swallowed hard, staring at the 10-year-old girl who had just declared she could land the plane. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Marina took a deep breath and began to speak with a quiet authority that made even the adults pause. We need to stabilize. The plane first, she said. You're losing altitude too quickly. Keep the nose slightly up and maintain glide speed. Don't let the plane stall. The words were precise, technical, and clear. She moved to the side, directing the adults gently but firmly. Adjust the flaps to 20 degrees. That will help slow the descent without losing too much altitude. The pilots exchanged uncertain glances. Could a 10-year-old really know what she was doing? But the shaking of the aircraft and the continuous alarms left them with no choice. With a shaky nod, they followed her instructions. Gradually, the violent tremors lessened, the plane leveling slightly as it began to glide more steadily through the air. Marina scanned the navigation instruments. There's a clearing ahead, she said, pointing at the screen. A long strip of flat terrain. It's about 12 miles from here. If we angle correctly, we can land there. One pilot hesitated. That's a very short strip. And surrounded by water. I know, Marina replied. But if we glide steadily and control our speed, we can make it. Trust me. Her confidence was unwavering, and for the first time since the engines failed, the pilots felt a spark of hope. Marina's mind ran faster than any panic or fear. She visualized the approach, calculating distance, glide slope, and wind. Every detail she had memorized on her simulator was now a lifeline for hundreds of lives. The plane shuddered as a gust of wind hit the fuselage. Marina's hands tightened on the edge of the co-pilot's panel. We need to correct left by 3 degrees. Keep it steady. Slow adjustments. The pilot nodded, making the adjustments carefully under her guidance. Okay. 3 degrees left. Gradually, the aircraft responded. It leveled further, approaching the clearing in a controlled glide. Marina's eyes never left the instruments, her mind running through sequences of speed, pitch, and descent, ensuring every instruction minimized risk. Keep speed above 140 knots, she said. Any slower, we could stall. Keep it steady. Breathe. The cockpit was tense but silent except for her calm voice. Outside, the passengers could feel the plane stabilizing slightly, though fear still gripped every heart. The plane now glided, like a careful bird, heading toward the narrow clearing that would determine the outcome of everything on board. Marina scanned the runway on the instruments, and then out the window. Angle is good. We'll need to flare the nose slightly just before landing, not too much, or we risk losing lift. The pilots followed her guidance precisely, hands moving cautiously over the controls. The plane responded, descending gently, wings level, glide slope perfect. The wind howled outside, but inside, Marina's voice created a calm bubble, a lighthouse in the storm. Asterisk. Almost there. Maintain calm, focus, and watch the speed, she whispered to herself as much as to them. Asterisk. The clearing loomed closer, the trees on either side like silent spectators. Marina adjusted the approach slightly. Left rudder 2 degrees. Flare 3 seconds before touchdown. Asterisk. The plane dipped gently, following her every command. It was still far from over one misstep, one wrong angle, and disaster could strike, but Marina's calculations and calm hands guided the aircraft steadily, giving the adults the courage and clarity they needed. Asterisk. Hold steady, steady, she whispered as the final seconds approached. The plane was aligned perfectly. The clearing stretched beneath them. Every heartbeat on board was synchronized with the descent of this enormous metal bird. Asterisk. For the first time since the engines failed, the pilots felt a sliver of certainty. If Marina could keep guiding them this precisely, they might just survive. The entire plane, in essence, was now in her hands, and she would not fail. The clearing ahead grew larger, a narrow stretch of flat terrain surrounded by trees and water. Every second counted. Marina's small hands gripped the edge of the co-pilot panel as her eyes darted between the instruments and the view outside. Her mind raced with calculations, recalling every approach she had practiced on her flight simulator. The glide was perfect so far, but the landing would be the real test. Asterisk. Keep steady, she whispered. Maintain speed. Don't let the nose drop too fast. Asterisk. The pilots followed her instructions with careful precision, adjusting the controls. Slightly under her guidance, the plane dipped gradually, descending toward the narrow clearing. Outside, passengers gripped armrests, whispered prayers, and held children close. The cabin was silent except for the sound of air rushing past the fuselage and the occasional alarm that refused to turn off. Every eye in the cabin was focused on the invisible guidance that Marina was providing, even if most had no idea a 10-year-old was orchestrating their survival. Asterisk. Marina scanned the instruments one last time. Flaps to 30 degrees, she said, pointing at the control panel. We need extra lift and slower speed to avoid hitting the ground too hard. Asterisk. The plane responded, gliding even more smoothly as the flaps extended. Her mind ran through every calculation: descent rate, wind adjustment, glide angle. The clearing stretched beneath them, still too short, but enough if the landing was executed with care. Asterisk. 3 degrees left rudder. Hold for 5 seconds, then straighten, she instructed. The plane tilted slightly, correcting its path over the uneven approach. Outside, the forest lining the clearing seemed to reach up toward the plane, a stark reminder of how little room there was for error. Asterisk. Passengers gripped each other, bracing for impact. Marina's mother held her hand tightly, whispering, "You can do this, Marina. You can do this." Marina nodded, drawing strength from the calm focus that had always guided her, even in the simulated skies of her home. Asterisk. Slowly, slowly.
Flare the nose in 3, 2, 1.
She whispered, barely audible over the rushing wind. She pulled the nose up gently, controlling the descent with perfect timing. The landing gear kissed the ground lightly, and the plane's wheels made contact with the earth. The massive aircraft shuddered slightly but held steady. Asterisk. Keep it straight. Brakes ready, Marina instructed. The pilots applied careful braking, the aircraft sliding along the short clearing. Dust and debris kicked up, the tires screeching, but the plane stayed on course. Every second was a battle between momentum and precision. Asterisk. The end of the clearing approached. 100 meters left. Marina's calm voice guided them. Hold steady, small correction. Don't overdo it, almost there. Asterisk. Finally, the Plane ground to a complete stop. Silence filled the cabin. The engines were still dead. The aircraft had landed without power on a narrow strip surrounded by water and trees. With no injuries. The cabin erupted. Passengers screamed with relief, some crying, others hugging strangers as if they had survived a shared nightmare. The flight attendants moved quickly to ensure everyone was safe. Marina's mother ran forward, lifting her daughter into her arms, tears streaming down her face. "You did it! You saved us all!" she cried. Marina's hand shook slightly, but her eyes sparkled with pride. "I just followed what I practiced," she whispered. The pilots, still catching their breath, looked at her with awe and gratitude. "We would not have survived without you," one said quietly. "You saved every single life on this plane." Marina's gaze drifted out the window at the calm sea beyond the clearing. The sky that had once been peaceful and serene had threatened disaster, yet she had guided them through it. She realized that courage did not always depend on age. Knowledge, calmness, and focus could change the outcome of even the most impossible situations. Emergency crews arrived, but the passengers had already experienced a miracle. Marina stepped out of the cockpit, her mother beside her, and walked down the aisle as everyone around her applauded and cheered. She was a hero, but she barely noticed the attention, focused instead on the relief that everyone was alive. As Marina looked back at the plane, she whispered softly, "We did it. We all did it." In that moment, the impossible had been made possible by a 10-year-old girl whose courage, knowledge had saved hundreds of lives. And though she was small, she had proved that heroes come in every size. The plane rested safely on the narrow clearing, engines silent, passengers shaken but alive, and Marina standing as the unlikely savior who had turned fear into triumph.